Mr. Mayor, we're ready when you are.
Okay, here I am. Okay, we will call tonight's special council meeting to order then. Jeremy, what could you start with taking attendance?
Yes, Councilmember Wengert,
Here.
Councilmember Richards,
Here.
Councilmember Hughes,
Here.
Vice Mayor Derwin,
Here.
and Mayor Alves.
I am here. And is there anyone in attendance in the community hall?
No, there's no one from the public in attendance in the community hall.
Thank you. Okay, good evening, welcome, and thank you all for this experiment in social distancing and governance. We did not receive any. We are just for the record. We don't have an open mic provided for public comment at the town center. So we asked for emails, and we did not receive anything that looked pertinent to public comment. So I'm going to skip on to public comment. You are free to email us if you want something put in the record for the meeting that is not on the agenda. But we'll move directly on to our first item, unless Manager Dennis has anything he wants to add to this before we start there.
No, nothing from our end. Thank you.
Okay, then our one item of business tonight is the declaration of a special of an emergency around the COVID-19 pandemic that is currently spreading. I will let Jeremy start with his presentation, and we will discuss. Jeremy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Alves and members of the council. I wanted to start off by stating that, without a doubt, this is a pretty extraordinary time. And with most extraordinary times, extraordinary measures are required. And as we've seen in the last couple days, the County of San Mateo has taken some extraordinary measures related to the spread of the disease. Before you and in the packet is a declaration of local emergency regarding the spread of coronavirus, and there's a resolution attached. I am sure that council members have many questions related to the emergency declaration, but we also wanted to broaden the conversation as it related to the operations of Town Hall and the services that we provide. And if I may, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to share a few thoughts related to that, or would you like to go to questions on the emergency declaration first?
Well, yeah, actually, the first thing I want to say is I want to thank Jeremy, Manager Jeremy Dennis, several staff members, in fact, all the staff members who have put a lot of work in the last several days. The last 30 calls on my phone are from Jeremy. A lot of work has gone into this, and I just want to thank all of them and just point out that staff and the county and staff across the county are doing tremendous work on getting us to where we are right now. And with that said, we'll go on to questions after this, but Jeremy, why don't you go ahead with your presentation?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So wanted to focus this portion of the conversation on town services. As we've seen in the order that was issued by the 6 county health officers in the city of Berkeley yesterday, there's some pretty significant measures that are that we need to put in place in order to stop the spread of the disease, and that does not stop at the doors of Town Hall. The primary concern that I have is finding a balance between ensuring that my staff is well and healthy and can provide the service that residents expect in Portola Valley. We're fortunate to live in a day and age where technology provides us many opportunities to communicate with one another and with residents and perform some basic services. However, the health issue is significant, and given what we saw in the order yesterday, my recommendation as it relates to services is that we require employees to work from home starting tomorrow, unless there is essential services that are required for us to perform. And I have a brief presentation that I can give on that in a moment. This would be a major change in the way that we operate in the community. We take pride in having an open door policy where people can come in, say hello. Anyone who knows me, people come into my office quite regularly, and we we enjoy that. We love that. That's why we work here. But if the staff isn't kept socially distant from people, we won't be able to perform the duties that we love to do here. So that can mean a lot of things. So I'd like to show or share with you and those who are participating in this meeting description of some of the services that the managers here believe are essential. Some may be obvious, but I think they're worth stating. And as you can see here, they include items such as pay our bills, pass a budget, maintain our infrastructure, our IT infrastructure. We have not been told that the audits that are performed on us on a regular basis have stopped, so we need to continue to do that and clearly pay our employees and provide benefits. So these are the town-wide ones, and I will come back to any of these should anyone wish me to do so. Departments, in particular, wanted to focus on two departments, Public Works and then Planning and Building. Here are listed 4 general categories of essential services. The first is perhaps the most important, right-of-way clearance to ensure that traffic, and if we need to in an emergency, we can evacuate the town. Life safety work on our trails and roads and facilities. So imagine there's a downed electric line here on the campus, or there's a significant issue with the trail. We'd want to go out and take care of that so people aren't hurt. Making sure that any open public spaces are as clean as possible. We are struggling to meet the demands of this disease as it relates to keeping our bathrooms clean and other public spaces clean. Janitorial services, very hard to come by. We've been able to increase it a bit, but not as much as we want. And then life safety engineering, right-of-way, erosion control, utilities, and the like. Those are things that we would imagine need to continue as an essential service. For planning and building, a similar mix as it relates to inspections. So there certainly are life and safety inspections that we would imagine continue. You can see some examples there. This is not an exhaustive list, but clearly we would want to respond to these needs as quickly as possible. There are some project sign-offs that we would want to accomplish for people for financial reasons, if they've got construction loans coming on or they've got mortgage issues. And we are not aware, and Cara, town attorney, Cara Silver, can opine on this or share information. We're not aware that there's been any changes in the statutory land use deadlines in the Permit Streamlining Act or others. So with these as examples, I'd like to share the following. The services that we believe we can continue to provide are the ones that you just saw. So that means there's a whole host of services that we do not believe we can continue to provide during this situation. Some are in areas that we've already taken action on, so related to the use of our facilities. We have canceled all events, classes, and the like. And as I think many of you know, the library's done the same. We have closed the playground to ensure that there's no spread there. We have not closed our fields. We're not proposing that as long as people are socially distancing themselves, that's appropriate. In the planning world, it is proving already difficult to keep up with the load that we currently have. And my proposal would be to limit or prohibit new applications, planning applications, from coming into town hall during the duration of this order. Those permits on the building side that are moving along, there are a few that we believe we can close out fairly quickly because of the reasons we've listed earlier. There are exceptions in the rule related to affordable housing projects, and we're anticipating the Priories project to come forward for building permit, and we believe we can do that. But we're really talking about curtailing our regular services. Fortunately, as I mentioned earlier, we're able to provide a lot of service over the phone, in the computers and the like, but processing applications does require a lot of face time, and the technology hasn't quite caught up with all the things we want to do. And I want to focus our energies on those services that are critical to do. With that, Mayor Alfs, I'll stop there and take any questions that you or the council may have, and I do believe you have access to the raise your hand feature to see who may have questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I do, in fact. Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, I will take a round of questions from council. You know, I just want to start by saying to those of you who might not have been following this as closely, we recognized what a profound disruption this is, or what a profound change this is in services, and how drastic this might seem. You know, I've been following this. I'm sure many of you have been following it as well. If you're following this closely, you know, both locally and internationally, you no doubt recognize just how dire the situation is. And we are being very cautious, but I don't think anybody questions at this point the wisdom of erring on the side of caution in all of this. So what we're talking about in terms of these measures seems extreme. I grant you that, and I apologize for the disruptions this is going to cause to people. But personally, we think this is the level of change we need to implement right now, and we will be discussing it further. But I just want to point out that we're taking this very seriously for a variety, and I think many of you will understand it is warranted. I see two hands up currently, Craig and John. Craig, would you like to ask questions first?
Sure. I think I have three questions. The first one, Jeremy, your slides were very helpful in pointing out what we're planning to do at Town Hall. There are other town services as well that are provided by contractors to us. And I think probably ones that many people may be concerned about are refuse collection and public safety in the sheriff's office and fire departments. Could you tell us a little bit about what we can expect from those services?
Yes, thank you. We'll start with public safety. So the staff, myself included, have been in close contact with Captain Christina Corpus, who is effectively our police chief. She manages our contract with the sheriff's office, and Fire Chief Rob Lindner and his staff. They do not anticipate any issues related to the interruption of public safety service. And in those conversations, particularly with the sheriff's office, I've asked them to be visible, be around where we see people who may need a reminder of social distancing, to get that reminder. So I have no concerns there whatsoever. And that relationship's longstanding with both of those entities, and we feel very good about it. We've also heard from our friends at Green Waste. We don't anticipate any changes related to their service either. I am expecting from them some materials that we can put out publicly in the next bit that can explain where things are, but right now not anticipating any.
Thank you. That was very helpful. My second question is, I believe that the county public health order specifically listed residential construction projects as essential services. So what you're proposing is to essentially within the town curtail that somewhat, just because we logistically aren't capable of keeping up with it.
Yeah, and this is an area that we welcome the council's direction and input. To put it candidly, I am uncomfortable assigning staff or contractors to inspection services on construction sites that will possibly not be meeting the social distancing requirements. The order from the county has gone through some interpretive changes over time, but we do understand it to be fairly broad at this point. But that does not mean that we'd be issuing permits for those activities. So that's my suggestion. I think it's also worth noting that with the increase in people in town who are now required to work from home with construction projects, there will be, I imagine, an increase in concerns around noise. And by curtailing, certainly from the perspective of the health, I think when you look at the issues of noise, we're, if you will, taking care of two birds with one stone. We will not be able to enforce some of these issues in the way that we'd like to. But I think that the most prudent thing to do from a health standpoint is to limit our employees' exposure to potential transmission sources, and that includes construction sites.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And then my last question is around public works. As we have guys out repairing trails or chainsawing trees that have fallen across things, or cleaning our public fields and so on, they're by and large probably going to be off doing it by themselves like they often do. But I imagine, as you pointed out, there are a lot more people in town. There'll probably be more people during the daytime taking a break from work, going out and hiking a trail, and taking advantage of being able to go outdoors as long as they're maintaining social distancing, to get a little bit of stress relief from that, I hope. Are we providing any training to our employees around what they should do should somebody come down the narrow trail that they're spreading gravel on, or whatever they might be doing?
In a word, yes. The staff has already received some training. They'll continue to receive that training, and we believe that we can be ambassadors for the order and share that. We're already doing that here at Town Hall when we've seen people not practicing social distancing. And if that happens on a trail or other places in town, we'll do that as well.
Great, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Okay, John has his hand up. John, go ahead and ask your questions.
Yeah, two quick questions. First one, Jeremy, you mentioned the statutory land use deadlines have not been changed. Has there been any discussion of changing those at all?
Oh, there's certainly been discussion at the local level, and I've been in contact with Assemblyman Berman's office asking for them to be looking at that. We're not anticipating the projects that would trigger that in our community, but it is a huge issue in some of the other communities that we're dealing with. This would be an issue related to ADUs for us.
Right.
I understand that the Assembly is currently in recess and won't meet again until early to mid-April. We'll see if the governor calls them back or the governor issues some orders. If it's okay with you, Mayor Alves, I defer to Cara Silver, the town attorney, if she's got any further comment on that issue.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, Cara, I've been meaning to ask you if you had anything to add to this.
Sure, thank you. The latest information that I have heard is that the governor was considering an executive order that would waive certain permit streamlining deadlines, and that was the next urgency order that he would be taking up. I was expecting something perhaps today. It didn't come, so it's just unclear whether that will in fact materialize.
Okay, thank you. John, did you have other questions right now?
One more regarding the exceptions for affordable housing. What does that entail, more or less? I mean, in general.
I'll start, and Cara, maybe you can jump in. Much of this is still interpretive, so I think there'll be different flavors of this. I don't see it as it relates to ADUs in Portola Valley. That might be the case in other places. I know that, as I mentioned earlier, we are anticipating a building project to begin over at the Priory for construction of housing for their teachers and faculty. That would apply. It would apply to them, but it is interpretive. Cara, do you have anything to add?
Yes, thank you. So the order language itself contains an exemption for, let me find the exact language here. Well, it contains an exception for residential housing construction with an emphasis of affordable housing and homeless shelters. So the I think that in talking to county council who helped draft this order, the thought behind that particular exception was that it would apply to larger housing projects. You know, obviously this was a 6-county order and there were lots of different scenarios that were being considered. So the intent behind the exception was to apply to larger housing projects. That being said, the county council thought that within San Mateo County, because there was such a need for housing, that local agencies could use their discretion to determine whether there was a desire to expand that exception to smaller housing projects as well. And one of the considerations for expanding that would of course be the city's ability to actually perform inspections. So that's something that really needs to be factored in as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Very helpful.
Okay. Anne had her hand up next for questions.
Yeah, thank you. Cara, I was wondering, this is probably, perhaps Jeremy, perhaps Cara, or a combination, is how the language that we're proposing relative to the permits, our normal permit process, differs from that which was, I know it was not outlined in yesterday's county order, but in terms of what you were describing earlier, Jeremy, I just want to fully understand what, if any, activity would happen in that arena during this period.
The question is what kind of permit activity would take place?
Right.
Well, my recommendation is that we cease accepting planning applications for projects at this time and focus on life and safety building issues, as we outlined here. And let me move forward in my slide to bring that up. There you go. And to provide the staff through the emergency order some level of flexibility to determine what makes some sense. We're trying to not get to a place where we're carving out multiple exceptions, which would be very difficult to manage. And then also, I would be concerned about the staff's exposure in situations. So it's pretty significant upfront from the planning side.
Similarly, a related question really has to do with, there were a number of exceptions in yesterday's county announcement relative to what I'd say safety issues related to ongoing projects, where there are obviously construction projects of varying sizes in different places and different stages that may find themselves in a very precarious situation relative to stopping immediately. So my question really relates to how best to encourage people who find themselves in that position to manage that with obviously an eye to quickly getting it to a place where it's out of the danger category, if you will, or presents some risk. And I'd appreciate your feedback on that.
Sure. This would fall under life and safety for us related to the building permits. We are aware of a few projects in town that their need to continue would fall under this definition, if you will. There are projects that simply, if they stop today, would be a dangerous place for people. So we'd want to get them to a place where they're not dangerous, and hope that they would then curtail their construction activities for the duration of the order,
Sure.
or depending on what the council decides tonight. But there are, Laura and her team are already, and I'm sorry, let me back up. We've communicated with everyone who has an active permit right now and let them know what the status is. We are receiving those questions. I know the Mayor Office has one public comment related to this. Today I fielded 4 or 5 questions that were in this universe of my projects at this point. What should we do about it? But anything life and safety, we will address.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, Mary Ann has her hand up. Go ahead, Mary Ann.
I had trouble unmuting. Today, Jeff and I were in, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Today, Jeff and I were on the county call with the county manager and many, many city council people, people from the public schools. Congresswoman Spear was on there, Jerry Hill, people from the offices of the assembly, other, Phil Tings, Berman, everybody was on there. Anyway, they did have a lot of questions about what are we supposed to do with permits that have been filed? What is an essential service and all like that? Can housing construction go forward or not? And what I heard, and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, is that anything to do with housing will be exempt because we are in a housing crisis and it is an essential service. And that includes ADUs. They also said they were talking to all the community development directors to come up with a uniform way to handle permits that have been filed. So I don't know if anything's come of that discussion, but that's what I heard. The other thing I wanted to say, or actually ask Jeremy, are you going to talk about any of the county services that they're developing? Are you going to talk about the prohibition of eviction ordinance? Are you going to talk about resources for people who've lost jobs, for house cleaners who are not being paid, for small business owners? Are you going to talk about any of that tonight?
Yes, I do have some materials related to the items you just discussed, Mary Ann, and I'm happy. We should do them within this item as it is the only item, and I can do that at any point. Going back, the city planning officials did meet late this morning and did not come up with a consensus approach, primarily because cities are very different from one another and their ability to staff is radically different in a situation like this. And that was shared then on a subsequent call that I was on with all the city managers. And what we understood was that each city is going to have to find the approach that works best for them as it relates to their staffing and their any concerns about health. So I think it was a valiant effort to try to find a way to coordinate some of this stuff, but there is a significant difference between San Mateo and Portola Valley. As all of you know on the council, we are the smallest staffed city in San Mateo County, proudly so. And the challenge with that is if you lose 1 or 2, 3 people, for instance, we have members of my staff out because they're taking care of their children, or somebody gets sick, our ability to provide any level of service gets severely curtailed. So I was appreciative that the county did offer us the opportunity to structure this in a way that made some sense. I certainly understand the approach of the county legal representation on housing. It's true, we're in a housing crisis. I have been comfortable with the interpretation that this is about larger projects and projects that actually do provide affordable housing as opposed to other types of housing projects.
Mary Ann, did you have other questions?
No, I'll wait until Jeremy brings up some of those topics that I talked about.
Yeah, so in general, yeah, as always, I like to have a round of questions. We'll read the public comments we have, and then we'll come back for a discussion among the 5 of us. Craig has his hand up, but Cara raised her hand, and I thought maybe I'd let Cara weigh in on this real quick.
My question is actually to Cara, so maybe I can ask it and she can answer her thing and then follow up. I'm not sure which order. Maybe she may have a response to something that was just said, so why doesn't she go first?
Fair enough.
Thank you. So I did want to add one more aspect to the summary of the call that Mary Ann and Jeff were on. That is that the county council realized that this, this was a colossal effort to draft this order. There are lots of gaps in it, although I think as a whole, it's a very well written order. And what he asked all of the city attorneys in San Mateo County for assistance on is to really to interpret the order for themselves based on local conditions. And you know that there is a very critical exception in the order for essential government services. And the language there gave specific authority to towns to determine what constitutes essential government services. And in keeping with that spirit, he encouraged the individual city attorneys to make their own interpretations of what would include sort of essential infrastructure or essential construction, given the circumstances of the town. And I'm happy to answer another question, Craig, if you had one.
My question was really, so the county public health officer has issued an order which is supported by the governor's executive order implementing these various restrictions. I believe the executive order also didn't just grant power to the county health officers, but to local jurisdictions as well. So could we not, under our police powers and through the executive order, if we wanted to constrain things even further than what the county had done? So whether or not the county order says that, I mean, they may have made an exception for residential construction, but if we wanted to remove that restriction within Portola Valley, that would be something we are empowered to do, in your opinion?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that would be the preferred approach on this particular issue. I think there is some broad interpretive authority that we have, but to the extent we want to be more restrictive than the order, it would definitely be appropriate to adopt our own local order. The one thing that we can't do and we're constrained from doing is provide exceptions above that.
Right. We can't loosen the rules. We can only tighten them.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. It sounds to me like what Jeremy is saying is that it sounds like we do have special safety circumstances in Portola Valley that differ from other parts of the county, and so we may well want to restrict construction of residential properties within Portola Valley and go a little bit beyond what the county order is, just because of our special circumstances here.
I mean, I think in a word, yes. And I want to be clear. What I'm proposing is very uncomfortable to do, and it wouldn't be something that I would be suggesting if I thought there was another way to move forward. And this is why I'm glad the council's discussing it. And again, sorry to be repetitive, but I am very concerned about sending my staff to construction sites that are not certainly meeting the spirit of the order, and could be sites where there could be some risk of transmission. And again, I think it's also worth noting that there will be a significant number of people working at home, and one of our normal calls is construction noise during daylight hours. It's going to get substantially worse. And I'm hearing that from other communities that is going on as well. So thank you for the consideration of this.
Okay. Anne has her hand up. Go ahead, Anne.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I think we're, to your comment, Craig, about increasing our restrictions or potentially tightening them, I have some concern about doing that. I'd be in the sense of, I think the best approach that we could be looking at right now is to give the staff potentially the latitude to determine whether the social distancing requirements or safety, their safety is an issue related to some of the situations they may be asked to be part of. I'm very comfortable giving them that option of using their discretion and their professional expertise to know when they are feeling that it is something that is not within comfort levels of, and obviously recommended 6 feet, social bounds, et cetera, where you're not able to maintain those just because of whatever the situation is. I think I'm less willing or would recommend that we have a more blanket restriction that says we're not going to look at anything that might fall into this category without allowing for some judgment to be applied. Because I think we are in extraordinary circumstances. And I think the intent is I think for anyone in this position, and I find myself in this position in the interest of full disclosure, that your intent is to shut down any work as quickly as you can, but it's really not possible and not safe to do that. And if there was an inspection required, for instance, it would not compromise the social mores that are currently being enacted. Obviously, nothing within 6 feet. So I think that in my mind, because we should allow for at a minimum a transition period for people to be able to manage as best they can those projects. And I think some parts of it are shutting down instantly. And again, from direct experience, and other parts require a follow-up in order to make sure that if there is and clearly we have no idea how long this shutdown for everybody is going to last, but let's assume a worst case scenario, which I think probably what we're all clearly anticipating, a very, very long and protracted pandemic here, that people be allowed to, and again, this is on a very short time period because everybody's looking to be responsive as quickly as possible, but that if staff is willing to consider some of those situations and obviously make the judgment at the time they're asked to do that, I prefer that type of an approach.
Okay. So this is clearly sort of our outstanding discussion item. Before we get too much into discussion, let's finish with questions for staff. I will read in the public comments that we have, well, really one relevant public comment, and then we'll come back to this discussion that's sort of started here. So, Craig, did you have a question or?
Yeah, I just have one follow-up for Carr again. So my understanding of the requirements for this type of public safety order is that there needs to be, well, I guess it depends on what you're ordering, but there often needs to be a fairly high burden of evidence to allow our local police powers to essentially trump other authorities. And I'm just curious whether we could in fact delegate staff to make those decisions, or whether we should do something like have a date at some point in the future by which people need to get things to the state that they're in. I appreciate, Anne, that shutting down a building project immediately is not what people will want to be doing, and you've got to get it, you got to wrap it in mothballs before you can shut it down. But I'm just from a logistical and legal point of view, Carr, is there anything that we need to know about how we would need to proceed if we were to do something like that?
Yes, so thank you. I guess you have two options. One is just a sort of gentle or wind down and with a date certain. And I think that a court would uphold that as a reasonable approach. But I also think that it is possible to sort of customize an approach as well. And so maybe you want to, ban all projects unless there is an exception, and you can articulate what those exceptions are, and some kind of exception process. And I think it would be appropriate to delegate that exception process to the town manager, so that he could then look into the particular facts and circumstances of the case. And I think that approach would also be fine.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Thanks.
Mayor Alves, may I just add a few other points that may be relevant to this portion of the question period.
Please.
As the council knows, we don't have in-house planning services, building services. We utilize a consulting firm to do plan checks and building inspection, building official services. I am expecting that there will be a lot of layoffs generally in the country in the coming weeks as different types of services slow down. And I don't know what the status will be for any of our consulting firms. I think people have read horror stories already about firms in the country laying off employees to then go get employment insurance. So we're in contact with our consulting firm, and I'm not saying this because there's something on the horizon that I'm aware of, but things can change rapidly, and that could affect our ability to perform any of those kinds of services for anybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry,
at this,
Mayor, so let me,
go ahead.
one other issue. Is it just relates to construction noise and the like. As the council knows, we have effectively a part-time employee that works on those types of code enforcement issues. We will have very, very limited ability to, I would say probably not much at all ability to do much about those kinds of complaints should they come in. The employee that works on that primarily is an employee that I would expect to be working from home and not here during the day to answer those calls, and certainly not driving to construction sites to try to shut them down. So just one other item I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Alves, did you want me to talk about some of the other issues, or did you want to make those statements into the public record?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. If you want to continue with that, then I can. There's no hurry in the public comment, but if you wanted to talk about the other issues, then yes, go ahead. Sure.
Well, let me, as Mary Ann had requested, let me broaden the conversation a bit just to bring in some of the other things that are happening right now. And this is in no particular order. They're all important. The county has identified senior staff to coordinate volunteer efforts. We've been in touch with those county representatives and shared with them the contact information of people in town who want to assist in any volunteer efforts for those who are in vulnerable populations. This includes all of our churches. They have reached out to us proactively and asked how they can help. There's also local efforts that I think Mary Ann and Jeff wanted to speak to in a moment. We have a business license program, which means that we have contact information for those businesses that have a business license. And we'll be reaching out to them in the next day with multiple pieces of information related to loan assistance, employee assistance, and the like, and more to come. SAMCETA, which is the county's economic development corporation, is putting something together that we're going to use. It's worth noting that both the state and the federal government have extended the tax deadlines. What they've done technically is waive penalties and interests for 90 days. So people should know that. I am aware of some efforts at AT&T to actually, I think a lot of the companies are doing this to provide some unlimited internet data. So people should look into that. And then Mary Ann, one other item that I think is really amazing. Our farmers market, the person who runs the farmers market, his name's Niall. Niall reached out to us late last night with a plan to modify our current farmers market structure to a drive-through pickup structure. We'd like to start this on Friday morning, and people would have the opportunity to purchase one of 4 what they call program bags. Those bags are made up of either essentials, vegetarian essentials, fresh produce, or fresh produce specialty. We think this is a wonderful idea. If you'll bear with me here, I'm going to try to show you a photo of the what this will look like. I don't think I can. My apologies. So there would be a contribution that we would need to make. I think we can do that under emergency powers, but we really appreciate that the farmers market wants to continue to provide a level of service here, and they want to utilize our local vendors, including our meat and bread vendors. So the cost hasn't been determined yet as it relates to the cost of the bag. It depends on how much we contribute. Our contribution, it's not insignificant. We could be looking at about a $15,000 a week contribution that we could pull out of emergency funds, but we think it makes some sense given where people are. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will take a moment now to read the 2 items into the public record. We received 2 emails this afternoon. The first one I'll read is from Eleanor Duff, and this is addressed to all of us. Actually, it's addressed to Laura, but I believe it is, Jeremy, correct if I'm wrong, this is addressed to the council, right?
Yes. Oh, and
Okay.
you can see in your shared screen, I'm sorry, a picture of one of the bags. So you can see the amount of food that's in one bag. The food would serve up to 4 people for 2 to 3 days. Thank you. Sorry about that, Jeff.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry. Let me get back to my. Okay. The first item I'll read is a letter from Eleanor Duff. This is addressed to Laura, but it is addressed to us. Thank you for your. Okay. This is regarding a project on Alpine Road. Due to a vast number of challenges on our project, we have been nearly done and hopeful to complete planning and building inspections for at least 4 months now. We have waded through months of the PG&E backlog, last-minute PG&E cancellations, multiple civil and geotech final letter revisions, and a multitude of contractor delays, and the drawing update requirements in this last multi-month stretch of time. In the interest of time online, I'm not going to read the whole thing. Basically, but I'm reading into the record. We will conclude in the full letter in the record, and the gist of the letter is that basically asking for us to move forward. This project is sort of close to finish. Needs to be finished to shift from a construction loan to a permanent mortgage. Speaks to Jeremy's point earlier about projects that are sort of at critical junctures and where we can continue processing and inspecting what would actually be an important service to them. The council, I know, has copies of this letter. I just want to have it's in the public record. Thank you, Ms. Duff, for the letter, and I think it's well worth considering this again, because it speaks to the point that we probably do need to keep some level of activity going forward with these things to be considered. The other letter was from Lori Duvall. Thank you, Lori. I know you're listening. And it's, I'll just read part of it. Thank you for all your tremendous work preparing our community to be ready for and to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. I am grateful that so many of my fellow residents are stepping up to help each other out. The next few weeks will require patience and resilience. We are all in this together. Sincere thanks, Lori. Lori, thank you for that letter. Those are the 2 comments we have. So with that, I will pull it back to the group. to discuss. And I think I suggest we could resume with the conversation that we kind of started into with with this question about construction. Where do we come down in terms of allowing or halting construction? And does anyone want to start it on that one? Anne, do you want to chime in any more on that one to start?
Sure. Yes, that'd be great. I think that Kara had two very good suggestions in terms of either a wind down with a date certain or a customized approach. And I think my question actually to Jeremy would be how much of a burden he thought that second option might create for the staff. And obviously it's probably a dwindling burden, meaning it would tail down over time would be my expectation. But I really want to pose it more to Jeremy since he has a better handle on how many active projects there are in town right now.
Thank you. It is a burden in this sense. The way that we particularly schedule our inspections is on a 24-hour notice. Usually it's not much more than that typically. So we'll get a call Monday morning and they want to come in Tuesday. So managing that with remote staff could present some challenges. Not having the construction or building permit inspection piece narrowly defined could, I would expect it to create a lot of inquiries about projects. And I am always reluctant to pick one project over another. Projects can be different enough where that might be easy, but there's a lot of projects that seem pretty similar, and knowing what I know about the potential of staffing challenges in this situation, that can get pretty dicey, if you will. Building inspection is by its nature a tough one because everybody wants their inspection done yesterday. People get pretty frustrated when we're not able to schedule something in a quick turnaround period. And I don't know that would necessarily change in this climate. So I have some reservations about staff having a broad interpretive role because I think it could cause it could cause frustration for those who are asking and don't get it. And I suspect that council would hear about it. I don't know if that's helpful, but I think that that's the environment that we'd be operating in.
John, do you want to weigh in on this or?
Yeah. Okay, I'm already muted. I think that the idea of having a discretionary process makes sense. I just think it should be a fairly centralized because it's not the kind of work process that probably anybody's ever signed up for, and I think it would be unfair to place that kind of burden on most of the staff. So I think it just has to be carefully orchestrated and narrowed so that it isn't something that everyone has to lose sleep over. If that makes sense.
Jeremy, is there an effective way to manage that? I mean,
candidly, I don't know. I don't know how we would. I believe there's a way to manage life and safety issues. They're fewer and far between, and I can define those in a very particular way, as you saw. It gets harder when it's broader than that. I do, going back to one of my earlier points, it's hard in this situation to place your trust in someone if they've not been socially distancing. You don't know. And the whole point is to try to limit, to the extent we can, our interactions with people across the board. And every time you introduce a new element to that, it's a potential recipe for transmission. So, I mean, certainly some of the larger projects in town, you could have 15 or 20 people there, and I am very reluctant to send my staff or the consulting staff out for that kind of inspection without it being a life and issue. Now, that being said,
Yeah.
you can manage it, but it's very, very, I think it tends to be arbitrary, and arbitrary tends to create an environment where people are pretty frustrated. And again, I'm not saying this like lightly. This is something that, we've struggled over here as we've been putting together our thoughts and our recommendations. The order from the health officers, we thought, gave us a lot of guidance from the very top level, which was people are supposed to be limiting their social interactions. So that was certainly a starting place for most of my analysis.
I agree, and I agree that COVID-19 doesn't care if you're having friends over for dinner or building a house. I mean, a gathering is a gathering. So I just from a public health standpoint, I just don't think the county's guidance is terribly great. But that's something for us to discuss. Craig, you have your hands up. Do you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I think I understand the economic situation that people are in who are in the middle of a construction project, and I obviously want to minimize the harm to them, but we are in a public health emergency state that is causing an enormous amount of economic damage to all kinds of people, and so my inclination is to get all of these construction projects mothballed into a safe state as quickly as possible. Ideally, some of them could just not come back to this project site and they'll be okay. There may be some that need to, put a cap on the gas pipe or whatever they need to do to reinforce the wall that's not fully in place yet, or whatever they need to do to get them safe, and then leave the projects as soon as possible. If you look at the airline industry, you look at my company, where we're in the middle of a clinical trial where nobody's going to be showing up to participate in the clinical trial for the next few months. You look at a range of other situations. There's enormous economic upheaval, and I do feel very sorry for people who are in the middle of a construction project, because I remember from mine what a pain in the neck it is to get the contractors and the subs to show up, and PG&E to do their part, and coordinating that and getting the inspections when you need them, and then the products get delivered and they sit out in the rain, and it's a nightmare. And the smoother we can make it in normal circumstances, we try as hard as we can, but these are not normal circumstances. And so I think we do have to make a little bit of a hard decision here, and try and figure out, what's the minimum thing that we can do to cause economic harm to these folks who are in the middle of construction projects. But our primary concern has to be public safety.
I agree. Anne, go ahead.
I agree with all you said, Craig. And I think, having a direct experience, frankly, right now with all of this, my goal has been about really looking at how quickly the job sites can be, I have 2 projects underway, can be wrapped up. And one is they're both problematic at some level, but I think I've got it now to where within a very reasonable period of time, hopefully as early as the end of this week, everybody will be off site on both projects. And so I think all of the people like myself who are caught in this, it is obviously a very uncomfortable position, but in the context of the much larger health emergency we're all facing, there's no question in my mind from the minute it all came down yesterday, and even before that, I was already talking to the contractors about, I'm concerned about your people, I'm concerned about all of us who are here, but mostly about everyone involved. And so we were already starting to make plans to move it into a new phase, if not, to shut it down. So I think if we allow people, some flexibility, because there are projects much larger than what I'm going through right now. And obviously we've heard of one very significant one. And unfortunately, I think in those, we're probably just not going to be able to accommodate the amount of time they would require to get all the steps that might be needed. And so I think that the flexibility is probably best given to whomever is on site, the homeowner or a resident, to say, you're under strict, obviously, we're all moving towards minimizing the impact of COVID-19. And that means all of the things we know it means relative to social distancing and everybody staying home who are in all positions. And the economic damage is going to be incalculable in terms of what's happening now. And this is really minor relative to what it is. And it's really, but it is about getting the sites to a safe place where it can be mothballed.
Mayor Alves,
Okay. Yes.
this is Jeremy. I'm sorry. I inadvertently, I had misread a comment that I received earlier from a representative of a resident, didn't send it to you for the record. If I may, it's very brief and I can read it into the record. It's pertinent to this conversation.
Yes,
Hello,
go ahead.
hello, Mr. Dennis. We would like to know if there's any possible way to get a certificate of occupancy on homes that are safe for occupancy and are really close to passing final inspection. In light of recent extenuating circumstances, can we get the CNO without planning and public works final? Inspections are currently on hold, so we can't schedule for those. Can FaceTime video conference an option? And it's Hui Din. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay. Thank you for that. Mary Ann has her hand up. Go ahead, Mary Ann.
Well, I was waiting for Jeremy to answer that person's request, but to the conversation about construction sites, I agree with all my colleagues. We need to close them down as soon as we can. All we have to do is look at Italy and France. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, thank you. I have to agree with Mary Ann on this, well, and all of you, is that we have to really be thinking about public safety and, yes, getting these projects to the safest possible place we can get them to. I guess the question would be, to me, do we delegate that to staff, or do we create more restrictive language when we declare our emergency? Anne, go ahead.
Well, the good news, I guess, in the sense of how this will shut down, I think, is that all of the contractors are not able to access their resources. So I think that it actually can shut down relatively quickly. And I think the most creative are trying to make sure that wherever they stop, recognizing they can't get any more help and people and resources, that it's as safe as it can be. And it won't be perfect, I think, in many cases. But so I think, to the point that obviously I know Jeremy's very uncomfortable with having his staff be making those final decisions on an individual project basis, just because we don't have the capacity and it can create the potential risk to the staff. And I appreciate that. And in lieu of requiring that the staff be the ones to be the one to make these decisions, I think we could ask, and I would potentially suggest that we would just have a wind down period of, pick a time. I would say reasonably it's going to take, since the order came out yesterday, till the end of next week, perhaps. I mean, again, I think people are moving as fast as they can. I don't think there's any reason why anybody wouldn't be, for all the reasons we're talking about. So, but again, I'm not sure how many projects are in this state, but I think there's probably a fair number of them, given all the activity we see around town. And so maybe, and next Friday, which would be March 20th, is a reasonable amount of time. Excuse me, that's a week, that's this Friday, sorry.
March 27th.
Yeah, 27th,
Yeah.
right. Might be, it's basically 2 working weeks to be able to accomplish it. That's just one suggestion.
Yeah, if I might suggest that as part of the order, we could also waive the restriction against working on weekends. That would give them an extra 2 days to achieve that shutdown. I don't know if any of our projects that we have in town are both large and at a state where they're going to take 2 weeks to shut down. But if we do have a specific date to shut them down on, again, to minimize the economic damage, I think 2 days of construction noise on a weekend is a reasonable balance to trade off, given that we are asking people to shut down projects that are going to get, if the weather stays like this another 2 weeks, continue to get rained on, and all the other things that happen when you mothball a project site for potentially several months. Does that seem reasonable to people, that we would allow people to work through this coming weekend if we do set the date to be the 27th?
Anne, go ahead.
Yeah, Craig, I do. I think it is, because I think we're showing the community that we really are trying to allow them some flexibility if they're caught in that, extra bad situation relative to this crisis, because I think everybody, as I said, is similarly motivated. Again, we can't assume that, but I think it's clear that there's going to be very little construction activity very shortly.
Okay. John has his hand up. John, go ahead.
Yeah, just weighing in. I think that makes sense. I don't know that 2 full weeks is probably not necessary for 99% of the projects that are out there, but it may be for a few of them. I don't know if Jeremy has an idea of how many projects are actually in this precarious state, if we know it all.
Thanks for the question. I would be more providing an educated guess than an actual number, because we're not always sure exactly where projects are in their process unless we've been out there.
Sure.
So that would be challenging to do.
Yeah.
I think what the council's describing can work. I'm a bit concerned about our ability to provide, if we have to go out and do some kind of inspection as it closes down, we might get a lot of those very quickly, and we're not going to be out there in a timely fashion, just given everything that I know. About our own current setup and how building works, because it's a part-time position, and just what the need will look like. So,
that's what I was thinking. Maybe it makes more sense, rather than make it a fixed deadlines, just make it clear that things have to shut down, and let us know what your schedule would be to do it as quickly as possible. And that might give us a little more ability to spread out the inspections as they are required.
And Cara may have some opinion on this. I do want to reserve the right in any case that if it's not a safe environment for staff to go out, I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to have people go out. So that might mean that there's projects that are winding down that we're not necessarily issuing some of the stuff that we would typically issue. Although this is an amazing circumstance, I don't know what that would look like. But I think
that's understandable, entirely understandable, and acceptable in some circumstances.
Okay. It would certainly be my preference, instead of a date, although a date can work, is to just get people closing out as quickly as possible. And I don't want to misinterpret where I believe the council's going, but after a certain date, there's no construction projects in town. Is that's a function, I believe, of the fact that there won't be any permits in process, but we won't be allowing anything to move forward either in construction. So I think it's a de facto prohibition for a period of time. Yep. Because of the way it's set up.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
At any given, do you have a ballpark number for how many permits are open right now?
We typically, we could have hundreds of permits open, but money, as John was describing, are for very minor projects.
Right.
And so on the building side, there may be 15 or 20 that are open that would need to wrap up in some way. They're dealing with rain, so there's going to be some of what I would expect to be happening under this direction to
be covered up. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So then it's just making sure that the site's okay and that there's no outstanding issues, which we'd want to do anyway. But 15, 20 is a number that I typically use.
That feels like that feels like a number where you could actually manage them and get them sort of mothballed on a, timely basis without too much stress on you and staff. Is that fair to say?
Notwithstanding if it's an inappropriate site to send someone, yes. I think that's
Absolutely.
And I'll talk with the managers are having a conversation first thing tomorrow morning based on this council meeting. And if this doesn't work, we'll let you know. But we'll try to make it work.
Okay. Craig, go ahead, and then John.
Yeah, when I was thinking about allowing it to continue all the way through to next Friday to the 27th, as opposed to this week or starting Monday or something like that, I was kind of imagining that it might take a few days to get the project to a state where it's ready to shut down, and then a few days to schedule the inspection. I think putting a date certain in there, even if it is nearly 2 weeks out. One thing that I do remember from construction project is that contractors respond to deadlines better than anything else.
That is a good point.
If you give them flexibility, their inclination a lot of the time will be, oh, I'll just do one more thing and drag it out a little bit. And then you're going to get to a state where none of them get inspected, and the county changes the rules and tightens them, and their workers aren't allowed to come to the project anymore. That could easily happen within the next 2 weeks as things accelerate here. So, I think there's one of the concerns that I'm trying to address here is actually having these abandoned construction sites. We don't want that. We want these sites to be made safe as quickly as possible. And so having a very firm date that is achievable, by which we think that the contractors should be able to make things safe and then get whatever inspection they may need. If they can't, or it's unsafe to do so, then they won't get that inspection. But hopefully the homeowners and the contractors can get things done as soon as possible to shut them down, so that if their workers are prohibited from coming to the construction site, or just can't reach there, or have childcare issues, or whatever reason can't make it to the site, they've left those projects in a safe state.
Yep, agreed. John, go ahead.
I just was thinking about the most likely reasons to need to have the staff out for inspections. In the case of rain coming up and trying to weatherize the site, generally that's not done under any kind of permitting process. The contractors just do that kind of on an ad hoc basis. As far as things that might need to be closed up, generally a site that's under construction would need to be maintained safely throughout the construction process. I'm having trouble imagining the types of things that might need to be done on an emergency basis that would require inspections. And I'm also thinking that giving people a fairly substantial amount of time is likely to tempt them to launch into other parts of the project that really wouldn't be covered by or have to close things down. I think we could end up making things a little more difficult in some cases, and don't think we want to go there either.
Mayor Alps, if I may, John's correct. I mean, the exterior, for the most part, isn't something we'd be permitting. There are erosion control things that we probably want to be looking at that they need to be doing, but I'm not sure that was necessarily an issue here. I think in the interior, if they're doing some major work, electrical, plumbing, I mean, you got to put somebody in the building and making sure that it's safe, and that makes me even more nervous. If it was just an exterior visit with 1 or 2 people on site, I get why people think that's okay. But if it's in a building that people have been working in, I've seen in other cities, they won't allow their building officials or inspectors in a building that somebody's been in for 24 hours. So they've taken some pretty specific language and done that. So if we're going to shut it down, we do need to make it safe, but we have to do it in a very particular way to ensure that our people are okay.
Anne, go ahead.
Perhaps one way to sort of accomplish what I think we're all trying to accomplish, which is to safely shut down projects without unduly harming the people who are very close to the end of their projects, is to John's point, I think, is that I can't think of too many situations that are likely to be ones that would require a safety-related inspection, if you will. And I think that perhaps if there's a way to, and you were just talking to this as well, Jeremy, to allow people time to get their job sites mothballed, but without the promise that there would be inspections that would be associated with whatever time period, so that it would shorten it up potentially. I mean, you could go as soon as next Monday, or sometime next week, or end of this week even, I guess. So I think showing some flexibility there, if we're not going to be comfortable, from what I hear you saying, Jeremy, having anybody issuing internal permits that are, where you have people moving around, where workers have been active, may be the way to solve it.
And one other thing
Go ahead,
to add,
Jeremy. Yeah.
we would love to embrace technology to allow us to do some of this stuff. So we've certainly had that as a suggestion. And if we can do that, we'll do that. I guess the joke in the office today was attach a GoPro to a long, a pole and point at different
Drones, Jeremy, drones.
Drones. Yes,
Drones,
thank you, Greg. We'll certainly try to do that. But then again, I mean, that opens up this idea that there's going to be exceptions, and like, if you did it for this building, why can't you do it for that building? And that is, in my opinion, a recipe for disaster. That's where people really get pretty frustrated.
So I'm as we're having this discussion, it's occurring to me. I mean, I'm thinking about sort of large, like residential, like large construction projects. How does all of this going to apply? If somebody's water heater quits tomorrow, we do want them to come in for a permit for the water heater. Do we grant, emergency replacement permits under this? I mean, I think that was in the slides, but how are you imagine handling something like that, or a furnace that fails and really has to be fixed soon?
So the technology, shout out to Brandy DeGarmo, the assistant to the town manager. In the last 3 days, what we have done with our technology is astounding. And the staff's ability to do this work from home, schedule things from home is not only possible, it's something that I think society should be embracing. So we can absolutely do that. And we do have officials on call who can do some of this work, and but to let people know that they're gonna have to give us a little bit of flexibility, because it may take longer than we normally can to get out. And that will be frustrating if somebody doesn't have hot water. That will be frustrating if somebody's got a window issue. But as long as they understand we'll get there as quickly as possible and try to schedule things in a way that makes sense, we'll be able to do it.
Okay. Craig and John have their hands up. Go ahead, Craig.
So given John's and Ann's comments about what permits might be required to shut down, I think maybe then bringing the date into Monday, so allowing work to continue through the weekend, but that project should be shut down by Monday. So Sunday would be the last work day on the projects. I think that tighter deadline will make people not be tempted, and this was a concern I had, but it was mitigated by needing inspections. But if they don't need inspections, I would agree to not try and tempt the contractor into saying, oh, well, if we just really, pull all the stops out and get 100 people on the job site, we can finish up the whole project by, in 2 weeks. And we don't want that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Okay.
Monday may be a better date.
Yeah, John, go ahead.
Yeah, I think my suggestion would be that we say Monday or whatever fairly short time period is available to close up your operations, weatherize the building, and that no inspections will be done, period. And then if somebody has an exceptional situation where they have to have an inspection done on a gas line or something, which I really doubt, because they have to maintain these things all through the process of the construction to keep them safe for their own workers and whatnot. And the inspections come at regular intervals that contractors work up to. So I don't really see there being very likely that there would be any major inspections that we needed. So I think we should just cut it off at this point cleanly right now and give people a short time period to close things up and weatherize them.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the consensus we're arriving at. That I think we all agree we want to see work stopped quickly on sites, maybe with some discretion from staff around sort of life safety issues mainly. Ann, did you have your thought? I thought I saw Ann's hand up, but maybe it went away. Did you want to say something, Ann?
No, I was just really going to say, I agree. I think that's the right approach.
Sure.
I think we're probably on the same page.
Okay.
Mayor Alf, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I should be utilizing the hands raised feature. I'm sorry, I'm not doing that.
Oh, no worries.
So, and I think Cara we should go over some of the particulars of the resolution. And I can do that. And Cara, chime in if you have anything you want to add. And I think one way
Yes,
to
please.
address this is to provide the town manager or his designee with the discretion to make those decisions. And we're going to define it as broadly as we think is possible in this situation, given what we've described.
I don't have a copy of the resolution. I got the agenda, but I did not get any other attachments or anything else. Is there a packet that I failed to get somehow?
There's no resolution?
It was, yeah, it's not part of the agenda packet. I think you sent it separately. I know I've seen it, but I was actually trying to find it myself.
Okay.
I don't have it either, just for your
I got the
information.
agenda and the slides, and that's it.
Same for me.
Okay, Cara, do you have, because it wasn't attached, what should we do here?
You can email it out now, then I can look at it.
Yeah, I would suggest that you email it out now to the council.
Okay, why don't, in the spirit of what we do in the schoolhouse, why don't we take a 5-minute break while we get this to you, if that's okay? And we'll just put this on hold. Is that all right with everybody?
Yep, works for me.
Before we do, a couple of things.
Because I can
Well,
have, there's staff here who can do this.
If you get started, there's a couple of things that we've been talking about. I will take this moment to kind of apprise the public mostly on, and my colleagues on this. A few developments. So Jeremy, Marianne, and I have been talking pretty regularly the last couple of days, so I'll try to fill you in on a few things. One, many of you probably know a group of well, first of all, several of you have reached out to us, mostly to Town Center, asking what you can do, and thank you so much. We really appreciate that. A lot of people are stepping up, and it's great to see people wanting to help. One group in particular, Steve Levin, Jane Wilson, and Rebecca Flynn have put together, are trying to sort of more formalize the conversation that started on the forum about trying to match volunteers with people in need. Thank you to them, and I believe they're looking to sort of if you reached out to them and they're looking to formalize that. One important thing was just, we don't want to make the problem worse through good intentions. So if you are going to, please do reach out, check on neighbors, especially people you think might be vulnerable, but please exercise social distancing and all the proper precautions. Please be careful about going into someone's house or things. Just obey all the same social distancing rules, even if you're going out to help people. That was one thing. The other issue, which I think the council should probably discuss, is how these meetings are going to look over the next several weeks or possibly months as this crisis goes on. One thing we've agreed on is that we probably are just going to any sort of major, interests of the public are just going to have to be put off for the time being. because it's hard to get really satisfactory participation through this. As amazing as staff has been in setting up Zoom tonight, this is not the same as a public meeting. And so certain things, for better or worse, are just going to have to wait is our consensus. And I'm happy to hear my colleagues weigh in on that. And also just on these meetings, if there's any, suggestions or ideas for how to perhaps better foster public participation. It's very difficult to manage real public comment over Zoom or any of the other remote things. But if people have ideas for how to do this and observe all the rules we have to observe now, I'm all ears on that. Mary Ann, if you have anything to add, those are the two things that I wanted to just quickly bring up as we discuss sort of all the ramifications of this declaration. Mary Ann, did you want to add anything to this?
Well, PV COVID Assist is the name of the, I guess, tool that will be live on the PV forum soon, that was created by Jane and Rebecca and Steve. And they do have guidelines for exactly what Jeff is talking about. And we're hoping that's really going to help. I keep wanting to talk about helping the vulnerable in our community, besides the elderly, besides the people who have disabilities, but the people who are losing their jobs, like at the nail salon or at, the hair salon, the small business owners who aren't going to be able to pay their staff if this goes on for 8 weeks or more. What about the house cleaners? They don't have any kind of sick pay, or any other workers who've been pretty much, or going to be decimated by this pandemic. There are many things that the county is doing. Jeff and I heard about it this morning. They are putting together a fund to, I'm not sure if it was loans to individuals, to small businesses, and to nonprofits. They're putting together a call center where businesses can call up and say, am I exempt? For example, there was a question, are cemeteries exempt? Yes, cemeteries are exempt. You can still go on working at your cemetery. They're also going to have a call-in center for attorneys to get information and questions answered. And if you listen to the governor's speech late this afternoon, he also talked about, I believe, up to $2 million in loans that would be available to small business owners. So my question is, is there a way that we can get all this information out to our people? Because there's a lot of it is in movement right now. We don't know exactly how it's going to happen, but if I were out of a job, I would be really anxious right now. And I would like some reassurance that perhaps I will be able to get some sick pay, or I will be able to take out a loan, or that I won't be evicted. That's the other thing I wanted to talk about. I know that there is a provision in the governor's order that is supposed to prevent evictions, but I think each city has to take action. Am I right about that, Jeremy?
Yeah, that is correct. Going to your broader point, that the communication team is going to put out all of this information as broadly as possible in the next day. All of the items that you discussed, if we have access to them and something that's actionable for people to look at, we will send it out. Cara, did you have some comments on the specific issues around what Miriam was discussing?
Yes, so the governor issued a specific order regarding policies with respect to both residential and commercial evictions due to COVID-19. And the governor did authorize cities to adopt moratoriums to address these types of evictions, which because of the existing state laws, cities would have problems doing without this particular order. So what the order does is it eliminates sort of the preemption issue in this area and authorizes cities to take their own actions to address evictions that are going on in their in their individual towns. I'm also aware of several different San Mateo cities who are getting together, and there are several different ways of approaching this type of moratorium. And I was on a conference call today with several attorneys, and there is going to be some effort to coordinate on this issue to come up with a uniform ordinance. Many cities have already started looking at this issue. There are several different ways of handling it. And so I think that the cities are trying to come up with one model that will work for most towns and cities. And it's likely that that model will include both residential and commercial evictions.
Okay. Mary Ann, did you have a comment?
Oh, yes, and on the other end, if tenants cannot pay their rent and a landlord cannot pay his mortgage, we did discuss that on the call today as to whether the landlord could perhaps get a loan. And it looked like, I'm not sure if that is addressed specifically in this package that the county's doing or in the governor's loan program, but I hope that it will be.
Yes, okay. The council should have, okay, Jeremy's sharing it now, but you should have the resolution in your inboxes if you haven't opened it already.
Mayor Alps, would it help if, while the council takes a look at this, if I read it into the record for those who are not using Zoom or on the AM radio?
Yes, please.
Okay, bear with me. Urgency resolution of the town council of the town of Portola Valley.
Sorry, Jeremy.
I'm sorry?
Before you start, it's going to be much easier for me to read it rather than hear you say it. So I'm going to mute you on my side so I can't hear you. Could we maybe, while Jeremy reads it, just reconvene the council maybe in 5 minutes or something so we can read it rather than listening to it? It'll be a lot easier to digest.
That's fine with me at this end, if that's fine with the mayor.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, and I'm going to put you on mute so that I won't be listening to Jeremy while I'm reading a different section of the document. So maybe Jeff, if you raise your hand when it's time to get back together, then we can visually see that.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay,
And
thank you.
worst case, I'll text you.
Okay.
Okay, urgency resolution of the town council of the town of Portola Valley declaring existence of local emergency. Whereas Government Code Section 8637 authorizes the town council to declare a local emergency, and whereas Portola Valley Municipal Code defines a local emergency as, quote, actual or threatened existence of conditions of disaster or of extreme peril to the safeties of persons, property, and environment within or affecting the territorial limits of the town, caused by such conditions as air pollution, drought, earthquake, epidemic, fire, flood, human acts, plant or animal infestation or disease, riot, severe weather, sudden or severe energy shortage, technological interruptions, the governor's warning of an earthquake or volcanic prediction, or other conditions, including conditions resulting from war or imminent threat of war, which are or likely to be beyond the control of town services, personnel, equipment, and facilities, and requiring the combined forces of other public agencies to combat, end quote. And whereas the town council hereby finds conditions of extreme peril to the safeties of persons and property have arisen within the town due to the following. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have stated that a novel coronavirus called COVID-19 is a serious public health threat based on current information. The County of San Mateo's health officer issued a statement on March 10th, 2020, that evidence exists of widespread community transmissions of COVID-19 in San Mateo County. The health officer further clarified that implementation of activities prescribed in a statement of March 5th, 2020 is now critical. On March 11th, 2020, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 constituted a world pandemic. And whereas implementation of the health officer's direction may have immediate or future impacts on the town's ability to provide services to the community as follows. Urgent modification to town services, including temporary closure of the Portola Valley Town Hall, cancellation of upcoming non-essential town-sponsored events and meetings, and increased telework by town employees, and additional service impacts such as temporary closure of town facilities and or postponement or cancellation of programs and services involving the town's recreational centers, library, and town hall, including planning and building services, and reassignment of available staff to deliver the following essential services necessary to protect life and property of the Portola Valley community: emergency building inspections, public works, emergency response, public information, and town council support, and the internal services necessary to support essential services, including payroll, accounts payable, procurement, information technology, and critical fleet maintenance. And reassignment of staff may impair ability to make progress on town council priorities and work plan and comply with mandated state and federal reporting. And whereas the economic impact of COVID-19 is projected to cause significant reductions in town revenues, whereas that the aforesaid conditions of extreme peril warrant and necessitate the proclamation of a local emergency. Whereas the town council does hereby find that the aforesaid conditions of extreme peril and warrant, aforesaid conditions of extreme peril warrant and necessitate the proclamation of the existence of a local emergency, and now therefore the town council of Portola Valley does hereby, 1, declare that a local emergency now exists throughout the town of Portola Valley, California. 2, during the existence of this local emergency, the town manager / director of emergency services shall have the authority to adopt emergency orders or regulations to ensure the health and well-being of the public and mitigate the effects of the local emergency, including but not limited to public health, safety and welfare measures, employee service levels, and purchasing and procurement. During the existence of the local emergency, the city council authorizes the mayor to appoint a subcommittee of 2 council members to approve the warrant list on behalf of the town council. In the event regular town council meetings are canceled or prompt payment is needed while the council is not in session. During the existence of this local emergency, the powers, functions, and duties of the town manager, director of emergency services, and the town council shall be those prescribed by state law, by the existing ordinances and resolutions of the town council, as well as this resolution, and any subsequent emergency orders or regulations adopted by the town council or director of emergency services. This local emergency shall continue until it is terminated by proclamation of the town council pursuant to section 8630 of the government code. The town council shall proclaim the termination of a local emergency at the earliest possible date that conditions warrant. The need for continuing this local emergency shall be reviewed within 60 days by the town council, regularly passed and adopted on the 7th day of March 2020 as signed by the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm calling Craig back. Hopefully he sees me.
I'm here.
There you are. Okay. So the first thing that comes to mind is that this does not specifically address the question we just had about construction projects in general. Does anybody feel strongly about, oh, sorry, Cara, why don't you go ahead?
I do have some language that I just drafted to reflect the council's discussion, if you want me to read that.
Well, could we,
sure. Oh, go ahead,
sorry,
Craig. Yep.
Cara, could we put it in, I mean, this resolution is authorizing the town manager to adopt emergency orders. Could this be an emergency order?
Yes, it could.
Okay, and then I had one other comment as well, just to add. As I was reading through this, I had a thought about what we've been discussing before. Would it be appropriate to mention that now, Jeff?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
It's really around deposits for construction projects. I don't know, and Jeremy, perhaps you could suggest whether it might be possible to return to people the whatever amount of money is I guess, unspent from whatever construction deposits that they might have. And then those would have to be reinstated before a project resumed. But while the projects are shut down, let people have their money back?
Certainly. I defer to Cara to see if that was necessary to include in the order. I understood that that these would be the types of things that I would certainly be doing. This includes any refunds or payments back to instructors, anything else of that ilk that we would need to do during the duration of this emergency. But Cara, if you think it's needed to be specifically mentioned, then we can certainly take that now.
Cara, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary to include in this particular order. It could go in the subsequent, if the council wants the construction issue to be dealt with in a separate order that's issued by the town manager, it can go in that order.
And
So one, go ahead.
sorry, Mayor Alves. In number 3, we included language around the warrant list. We, as the council knows, we have a mechanism that our payments, cutting the checks to anyone that we need to pay for a service, only happens after the council has approved the warrant list. I would suggest that if the council wishes to appoint a subcommittee, that we broaden this a little bit, that if there are those kinds of issues that I need some consultation on, that I have that ability to go to that subcommittee on the kind of issues that Craig's mentioning here, to get authorization, support, etc.
That would make sense.
That's what I was just about to suggest. Cara, did you have an opinion on that, or do you have your hand up? But
Sorry, no, I should not have had my hand on that issue. That's a totally.
oh, okay,
different
okay, I
issue.
saw a hand.
Yes.
Okay. So we have this resolution in front of us. Is there, I think perhaps at this point we could pass this resolution, and then a lot of what we're discussing are things that might come out in future orders between Jeremy and the subcommittee. I think we also were our suggestion was the subcommittee be myself and Mary Ann as the mayor and vice mayor, unless anyone has any, wants to opine on that. Is there anything does anyone have any changes they want to make to the resolution itself, or Craig, go ahead.
I don't think there is, but I just wanted to ask the question, since the mayor and vice mayor typically sign checks, whether they should also be the people approving the warrant list or not. I don't think there's a problem there, but I don't know if anybody else can think of if there might be a problem with that. If not, then I think it's fine for it to be the mayor and vice mayor. I think that makes sense.
And Mayor Alves, it may make sense to separate, I don't anticipate that the council will not meet to, one of the reasons we'll meet is to pay the bills over the next couple months. So I think it's smart to have this in here, but I think realistically that won't occur. So we could have, in the spirit of Portola Valley, 2 subcommittees of the council, if that's an issue. One that specifically looks at warrant lists and economic issues, and one that's broader in scope as a consultation.
Yeah, Ann's got her hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it could be an issue that the financial issue, just to sort of keep it sort of limited to that discussion, is one that could take, there's going to be multiple permutations, not only just looking at the warrant list and making sure that all those things are operating as they should. But as we get closer to the time in which our new budget should be approved, I think it'll require, and depending on our staffing as well, and availability of staffing from the financial side during this time period, I think there'll be some bigger discussions and issues that we'll need to address. I mean, again, I'm going with what the predictions are now relative to when this might peak, and the earliest I'm hearing now is May. So that'll put us right up against the beginning of next budget year. So I think there may be some benefit, to Craig's point, of having two subcommittees, one that's just focused on sort of finance and the other, which I think is a broader group that will have more of the many sort of multifaceted decisions.
Yes. Yeah, point well taken. Jeremy, you and I talked a little bit about this budget question. Did you want to go into that, talk to the council about that? Well, let's come back to that. I guess maybe my question would be, is two subcommittees significant? I mean, is it going to be harder to manage, or Jeremy, can you manage, maybe a subcommittee of the mayor and vice mayor, and then a second subcommittee, and perhaps it could be Ann and Craig as the finance committee liaisons?
That sounds great to me.
Works for me.
John, don't mean to leave you out. Is that okay with you?
That's fine. Yeah, not a problem.
And Ann, how about you?
Yep, no, that's great.
Okay. Okay, so we can amend this language to appoint amend the language to appoint a subcommittee of council members to approve the warrant list on behalf of town council, and a second subcommittee of the mayor and vice mayor to continue discussions of other items, something of other functioning.
I would suggest that to consult, the town manager can consult with the second subcommittee made up of the mayor and vice mayor on broader emergency issues, something like that.
As needed, yeah. Okay. Does that sound okay to everyone?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay, so unless there's any other discussion of this, I could entertain a motion to pass this resolution.
I would move approval of the resolution.
Second.
Okay, moved by Craig, seconded. I heard John, and that motion is this resolution as amended.
Correct.
Any other discussion? Okay. Do I need a roll call vote, or can we just?
Might be easier just for the record, so it's clear who's voting which way.
Okay. In that case, Ann,
Aye.
Councilmember Wingert,
Aye.
Councilmember Hughes,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Moyes,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. So it passes 5-0. And we have appointed, we have our two subcommittees appointed. Do I need a separate motion to appoint the subcommittee, Cara?
I think as amended, the resolution appointed the mayor and vice mayor to the consultation one, but the finance one as written probably needs a separate motion.
Okay. Do you want to make such a motion?
I would move appointing myself and Ann Wengert to the finance subcommittee that we just created.
I'll second.
And
Okay. Moved
Mayor
by Hughes, seconded by Wengert. Yes.
I'm happy to do the roll call.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Councilwoman Wengert,
Aye.
Councilwoman Derwin,
Aye.
Councilman Hughes,
Aye.
Councilman Richards,
Aye.
and Mayor Alf.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.
So just a couple other items. I have to assume that our next council meeting will be in this same format. Does anyone, and to the public, first of all, just thank you for your patience as we work all of this out. Obviously, this is not ideal in terms of, we don't like not having participation or sort of the more formal participation we're going through. And I, for the moment, I want to hear from my colleagues if there's any ideas they have in terms of things that we could do better on these meetings going forward, because we probably won't be able to discuss anything significant, but I'd like to make these meetings as smooth and as interactive as we can possibly make them, even if they're not going to be of anything too substantial. So, Craig, go ahead.
Well, I noticed earlier that some attendees were raising and lowering their hands when we were trying out raising and lowering hands. Is it possible to controlledly unmute them and allow them to speak so that we could have more interactive public comment? I don't know how unwieldy it would be if we have a lot of people to manage that, but not having the public comment, I think, is something. If we could figure out some way of solving that, it would be a good idea to do. So even if we just tried it once, if it doesn't work, we can always go back, but it might be worth trying for next time. If that's a feature.
I agree. Yeah, I didn't see hands going up and down. Is that?
I did. If any attendees could raise your hands, I think it showed up in at least my user interface. Not panelists and attendees.
No, I was going to add a comment, Craig.
Go ahead, Ann.
No, I think that's a good idea. I mean, I think if we can allow for some provision, and again, I'm not sure how it would work, and perhaps we could just ask that people really limit their comments to some time period, but I think that would be useful.
Yeah, and I have been on webinars before where attendees were able to do things like raise hands and speak, and it's under the control of the host. So I think there is some way of doing it. It may just require reading the Zoom instruction manual.
If I may, Mayor Alves,
Yes.
there is a city, San Rafael, that is piloting this kind of interaction with the public using technology. It's pretty new. A lot of cities do broadcast their meetings, obviously, but there isn't a live participation function. For the purposes of tonight's meeting, I think candidly, Carrie and I, Carrie Chin is the communications analyst who put all of this together. We wanted to make sure that the most basic functionality worked before we introduced additional functionality that could been challenging to simply just manage. We're absolutely open to it. We want to increase the participation as much as possible. I was certainly was hoping to see more emails, but understand that people want to react to the live conversation as well. So we'll do what we can.
Yeah, I think that would be. I agree that it would be ideal to. But we talking with Jeremy and Carrie about this week. That's exactly what we weren't sure how this would work in terms of just how many people were going to be online, who was going to raise their hand. Agree. We should probably try that going forward. Does everyone agree with that?
Very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Jeremy's, any other items you wanted to bring up while we're all sort of discussing this? I have a list. I think I got through my items, but did I leave anything out?
No, I think you touched on everything. Just to thank you, a thank you to my staff, in particular. In the last couple of days, we did have some people working from home the last few days in anticipation of this meeting. But in the last day, Carrie and Brandy and Howard and Justin and I and Laura all been here, putting in 14, 16-hour days to try to get good information out, and really proud of the team that we have. And I hope that we're meeting the high standards of this community, particularly as it relates to just getting people knowing what's happening. And if we've made any mistakes along the way, it's my apologies. I hope we haven't. So thank you.
Okay. Anne, looks like Anne, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I did, and it was mostly, and I certainly agree, have comments that I would make as we sign off, but I was more coming back, Jeff, to what you said. You'd gone through your list, but I know Mary Ann had a couple of issues that I think we might want to talk about in terms of sort of information and how we will aggregate that information. And Mary Ann, perhaps you can refresh our memory exactly on all the issues you were talking about, but I didn't want to ignore those.
Yes, thank you. Mary Ann, do you want to weigh in
Yes,
again?
I have many papers here. I have all my notes from the county meeting today, and then I have my questions. Oh, the prohibition on evictions ordinance, and that would be something that I guess Kara could help with, since she's working with other cities on that right now. I would like to get out information for how workers can access either, whatever money is available at the state or local level. I don't know whether it's loans, whether it's sick pay, whether it's unemployment, whether it's disability. As I don't even know what's exactly available yet, but when we know, I would like to get that out to people. And then the information for the small business owners, the call-in number at the county. Was that pretty much everything?
Those are the things I remember. Thank you for bringing that up.
I did want to mention the house cleaners. There's been a lot of talk on a lot of the blogs about house cleaners. Those of us who can pay should pay the house cleaners. I mean, Jeff and I, for instance, are paying our house cleaners not to come, but not everybody can do that. I understand that. But these are extremely vulnerable people. A lot of them are Latina. My house cleaner is a single mom with a Down syndrome child. Now they're home with their kids because all the schools are out. So it's a double whammy if you still have to go to work and you don't have childcare. So I'm really feeling protective of the house cleaners and anything we can do for them.
Yes, agreed. Yeah. Okay. Anne, go ahead.
Just as a follow-up, Jeff, to what Marianne was saying. I mean, Marianne, it sounds like you and Jeff are probably in a position to recommend some things on the issues you were just talking about, because I agree with you on all that you said. I think that part of our community is going to be unduly slammed by the economic impact of all of this. So to the extent you're able to articulate or recommend to us different alternatives or, some different programs or whatever you think may be the best solution or potential solution, I'm certainly willing to consider that. And I would recommend you guys lead that.
I think a lot of that is sort of developing from the county, and I think we'll probably just need to. A lot of that I think is just going to be us publicizing it and making sure that it gets out to the public for whoever can. I'm thinking about the county initiatives that were discussed today are things that are sort of ongoing, and we'll just keep updating you and the public as they move forward. Marianne?
I was just going to say the same thing. I think we should be updating the public as we get the information. I mean, there is even the health officer I don't think it was Scott Morrow, but it was another person on the call today. And I mean, she gave these statistics for how many people have tested positive, how many are in the hospital, how many are awaiting the test. She even talked about the people who are being quarantined in San Carlos from the cruise ship. So is that something that the public would like to know about?
That's a lot of that I think is summarized on the county health website. Is that correct? I've definitely gone to the San Mateo County Health website and seen sort of the updated statistics.
Yeah, a lot of it is that the update rate seems to vary somewhat, but I would be hesitant for us to pass that information on because ours by definition is going to be out of date. It's going to be behind, when we heard about it from the county. So I would rather direct people to resources where that information is available rather than try and repeat it ourselves.
Oh, I would definitely direct them to the county site. That's just the best resource I can think of for the deputy health officer, I think, was giving those numbers over the phone. And they're kept on the county website, and but they're not updated as often as, she had more up-to-date numbers than were on the site at that time, but we should definitely share that. But I think we should share that website if people want to keep an eye on it. One other quick heads up to the council. I am going to be coming into Town Center tomorrow. Jeremy and Carrie suggested that I record basically a short public service announcement to go on I believe on the website. Is that right?
Yeah, our thinking was that we'd put something together. So we'll be in contact with you tomorrow about that. And more broadly,
I-
Jeff, I think that with the council's blessing, having the mayor be attached to more of the information that we're putting out, and certainly drafting messages from the mayor and his voice, so people can hear from the electeds as well, I think is pretty important at this juncture.
If no one objects to that. Ann, go ahead.
I don't object. I think it's actually a good time, frankly, for all of us when because of just the unique nature of what we're going through right now, and obviously we're uncharted waters at all levels. I think it's a good idea that we communicate as much as each of us is individually comfortable doing. And I know I've never been a leader in communicating openly and a lot to the community, but I think in this case, just depending on how things progress, I think it'll be important for all of us to be as reassuring as we can be, as positive to, to really show the community that there's a whole group of people who are really here to try and do the best that we can do for the residents.
I completely agree that I don't need to be the only voice. I just feel like as the mayor, it sort of falls on me to be a voice and be available for people. So I completely agree. If anyone, you're all free to weigh in when you choose. We all use our best judgment. Obviously, that's all I can ask. Mary Ann, go ahead.
From working with Jeff and Jeremy and the staff and working with the county, I am so impressed with how prepared the county can be at this given moment in time when we don't know when the tidal wave is going to hit. But we are in really good hands. I mean, we are really blessed to live where we live with these people who are so committed to doing right by the community. And I mean, Jeremy was doing meetings by phone, by, I guess, teleconferencing on the weekend with the town managers. Everybody is working on this every single day because it is so important to us that we keep our residents safe.
Agreed. Yeah, I'll second that. I've been in contact mainly with Jeremy, but with other staff as well over the last several days, including the weekends. And yeah, a lot of work is going into making this situation as safe as we can make it. And again, to everyone listening out there, thank you for your patience. We will find more ways to make sure that you're involved in everything going forward. And let us know what you need. Check in on your neighbors, and again, just thank you for everything that you're all doing for us and the community. Is there anything else, Jeremy? Is there anything else we need to discuss right now?
No, nothing at this time.
Any council members want to add anything? I think we'll skip liaison reports and such. But does anyone want to add anything before we sign off?
No, not for me.
Okay, in that case, Ann, go ahead.
The only thing I wanted to add is to your thank you, both Mary Ann and Jeff, to Jeremy and the staff. I mean, while you're in the front lines as the mayor and vice mayor, certainly all of us have been in regular and incredible communication through the last period of time. And I really appreciate all that the staff has been doing in particular, and to our residents and all the workers who are here to support us. And I think I think it's likely to get a lot more challenging before it improves. And I think I would certainly encourage everybody listening to show great kindness to one another and to work together as we get through the pandemic.
Well said. Okay, and on that note then, we will sign off. Thank you to staff for organizing. Thanks to the council for participating. Thank you to the public for listening. And please keep in touch. Let us know what else we can do. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.